Jax's revenge domain. Tell everyone it's been a pleasure working with them. The doors closed on his stunned face. As the elevator descended, my phone rang. Scott's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Ryan Thompson, where are you? We're all waiting in the lobby, ready to make history today. I'm Ryan Thompson, 47 years old, and I was about to have what I thought would be the worst day of my career. Turns out, it was actually the beginning of something much bigger. There's been a change of plans, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the cardboard box in my hands containing 22 years of my professional life. I'm no longer with the company. The silence on Scott's end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Then, "What are you talking about, Ryan? This isn't funny. I've been terminated, effective immediately." Terminated? On signing day? That's ridiculous. This has to be some kind of negotiation tactic. Nobody fires their lead negotiator on the biggest deal in company history. The elevator chimed softly as we passed each floor. I watched the numbers descend, each one taking me further from the executive suite where I'd spent the last 3 years orchestrating this merger. No tactics, Scott, just reality. I suggest you speak with the company's representatives about how they wish to proceed. The elevator doors opened to the marble lobby of Hammond Industries. Through the glass windows, I could see Scott Williams standing with his team from Pinnacle Industries. Phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gestured in confusion. These were serious people, investment bankers, lawyers, executives who'd flown in from 3 different time zones for this moment. Behind Scott's group, I noticed Justin Hoffman had also arrived in the lobby, probably taking the stairs to make his grand entrance for the signing ceremony. Justin, 28 years old, Harvard MBA, and son of our CEO, Patricia Hoffman, the golden boy who just torpedoed the biggest deal of his mother's career because I wasn't wearing a tie. I walked out of the elevator, box balanced in my arms like some corporate refugee. Scott spotted me immediately. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he processed what he was seeing, his primary contact at Hammond Industries walking out with his belongings in a box. He ended the call and strode toward me, his expensive suit and confident demeanor masking what I could see was growing panic. Ryan. He wrapped me in a brief hug, as if physical contact could somehow make this nightmare make sense. What the hell is happening? We're supposed to sign in 20 minutes. The press release goes live at noon. I took a steady breath, very aware that Justin was watching our exchange from across the lobby. The kid had that smug satisfaction written all over his face, the look of someone who'd just flexed his authority and was enjoying the results. Afraid not, Scott. Your lead contact just got fired. Deal's off. Scott's face hardened as he followed my gaze to Justin, who was now approaching us with the confidence of someone who clearly didn't understand what he'd just destroyed. You did what? Scott's voice carried across the lobby, causing several of his advisors to look up from their phones and documents. Justin's expression began to shift from smugness to confusion as Scott's words registered. Behind him, I could see the entire Pinnacle investment team, 8 highly paid professionals who'd been working toward this moment for months, staring at him with growing disbelief. I was just enforcing company policy, Justin stammered, suddenly looking less like a Harvard MBA and more like a child who'd broken something valuable. He clutched the employee handbook like some kind of shield. His appearance violated our professional dress standards. No tie during an executive meeting. The words hung in the air like a bad joke that nobody was laughing at. Scott's expression went from confusion to something much darker. You fired the lead negotiator of a $2.8 billion merger because he wasn't wearing a tie? It's about respect for company culture, Justin said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Professional standards matter. That's when Patricia Hoffman appeared, rushing from the executive elevator with several board members trailing behind her like worried assistants. She moved with the quick, purposeful stride of someone who'd just realized her company was about to implode. Scott, I'm sure we can sort this out. Her voice carried that forced cheerfulness that executives use when everything is falling apart. Ryan is incredibly valuable to us, and this is clearly just a misunderstanding. But Scott had already turned away from her, speaking quietly to his team. I caught fragments of their urgent conversation, words like respect for their own people, and if this is how they treat their best talent and fiduciary responsibility. I stood there silently, watching 3 years of my work dissolve in real time. 3 years of late nights, weekend calls, missed family dinners, and careful relationship building. 3 years of understanding both companies' needs, navigating egos, and structuring a deal that would save Hammond Industries from bankruptcy while giving Pinnacle the market expansion they wanted. All undone because Patricia Hoffman's entitled son thought dress codes were more important than business relationships. Patricia approached me, lowering her voice to that confidential tone that executives think shows sincerity. "Ryan, please, let's discuss this privately. Justin is new to his role. He was overzealous. We can absolutely fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I replied, making sure my voice carried far enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Your son made a decision based on company policy. You supported that decision by your silence when it happened. I accept it." Scott turned back to face our group, his expression grim. "Our agreement was with Ryan Thompson. He structured this entire deal. He understood what both companies needed, built the relationships, negotiated the terms. Without him..." He shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, but Pinnacle isn't comfortable proceeding." "You can't just walk away," Patricia protested, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. "The contracts are ready. The due diligence is complete. The press release is scheduled to go live." "Actually, we can," Scott said calmly. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to something, then showed it to Patricia. "Page 17, Section 4 of your own merger agreement includes a key person clause. Ryan Thompson is specifically named. If he leaves Hammond Industries before closing for any reason other than documented illness or death, Pinnacle Industries has the right to withdraw from this agreement without penalty." The irony was perfect. I had insisted on that clause specifically to protect the merger if anything happened to me. Now it was the very mechanism that would destroy Hammond Industries. "Ryan wrote that clause," heard one of our lawyers whisper to Patricia. He was the only one who caught its significance during the legal review. Scott extended his hand to me, his grip firm and respectful. "Ryan, when you decide what's next for you, call me. Talent like yours is rare, and Pinnacle appreciates people who understand how business really works." And with that simple handshake, Scott Williams and his entire team walked out of Hammond Industries' lobby, leaving behind stunned silence and the wreckage of what would have been the company's salvation. I nodded once to my former colleagues, people who'd sat in that conference room and watched Justin humiliate me without saying a word, then walked out too, ignoring Patricia's increasingly desperate calls for me to come back and talk this through. Outside, the spring air felt different somehow. Lighter. Outside, the spring air felt different somehow. Lighter, despite the weight of what had just happened. I had no job, no immediate prospects, and had just watched my greatest professional achievement crumble in real time. Yet beneath the shock, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the parking garage. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, all from people who'd heard the news or seen the Pinnacle team leave the building. I turned it off without reading any of them. Whatever crisis was unfolding back at Hammond Industries, it wasn't mine to solve anymore. The drive home gave me time to process what had actually happened. In 30 minutes, Justin Hoffman had managed to destroy more value than some companies generate in a decade. The kid had probably cost Hammond Industries its survival, thousands of jobs, and millions in shareholder value, all because he couldn't handle seeing an executive without a tie in what he considered his company. At home, I did something I hadn't done on a weekday in probably 5 years. I poured myself a bourbon at 2 in the afternoon, then sat on my deck watching the neighborhood. When was the last time I'd been home before dark? When had I last noticed that my neighbor was renovating his fence or that the tree in my backyard was actually blooming? That evening, the news alerts started rolling in. Hammond Industries merger collapses. Stock plunges 34%. By morning, it would drop another 18% as the full implications became clear. The business press was already running speculation pieces about bankruptcy timelines and asset sales. I felt a pang of guilt thinking about the good people at Hammond who would suffer. Janet in accounting, who always stayed late during quarter end. Mike in operations, who'd been there since the company was half its current size. These weren't the people who'd sat silently while I was humiliated. These were hardworking folks who just wanted to keep their jobs and support their families. But a stronger part of me recognized that I hadn't failed them. Their leadership had. For the next week, I ignored my phone completely. Let it go to voicemail. Colleagues, journalists, headhunters, former clients, everyone wanted to know what had happened and what I planned to do next. I wasn't ready to answer those questions because honestly, I didn't know. Instead, I did things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. I slept 8 hours a night. I cooked actual meals instead of grabbing takeout on my way home from the office. I called my brother Kevin, who lived in Denver and who I'd barely talked to in months despite promising we'd stay in better touch after our father's funeral last year. "You sound different," Kevin said during our second conversation that week. "More relaxed." "Yeah, well, unemployment will do that to you," I laughed. But it wasn't bitter. It was actually genuine. "I've never heard you laugh like that," he said. "Being fired might be the best thing that ever happened to you." "Maybe," I admitted, staring out at my backyard where I'd discovered I actually had a pretty nice garden that my landscaper had been maintaining without me ever noticing. "But I still can't believe how it ended, Kevin. 22 years of my life. 22 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, canceled vacations, building relationships, understanding markets, creating value. And what did they give you back?" he asked. "What did they sacrifice for you?" I thought about that. The truth was, nothing. I'd given Hammond Industries everything. My time, my expertise, my relationships, my health, my personal life. I'd spent 3 years personally guaranteeing the success of that merger, putting my reputation on the line with every conversation, every negotiation, every late-night call with Scott's team. And the first time Patricia Hoffman's spoiled son decided to flex his authority, they'd let him destroy me without a word of protest. "You gave them everything," Kevin continued. "And they let some kid with a fancy degree and a famous last name throw it all away because of what? A dress code violation?" He wasn't wrong. 2 weeks into my unexpected vacation, Patricia finally managed to reach me. I'd been screening calls, but I recognized her personal cell number and curiosity got the better of me. "Ryan." Her voice was tired, strained. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, genuinely curious what she might have to say. "The board wants to meet with you. The situation here is—" She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "It's worse than we initially anticipated. Much worse. We need your help." I almost laughed. "Help with what, exactly? Fixing the company? Bringing Pinnacle back to the table? Saving Hammond Industries?" I let that hang for a moment. "The same Hammond Industries that fired me for not wearing a tie?" Her sigh was heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. "That was a catastrophic mistake. Justin has been removed from his position. He's been transferred to a junior role in research. I've been formally reprimanded by the board. The whole thing was handled terribly." I said nothing, letting her fill the silence. "Please, Ryan. Thousands of jobs are at stake here. People who worked alongside you for years, people who respect you and your work. People who sat silently while I was humiliated," I thought. People who watched their colleague get destroyed by a 28-year-old and didn't say a word. But I kept that observation to myself. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked instead. "Come to the board meeting tomorrow. We'll discuss terms. You can essentially name your price." I found myself considering it, which surprised me. Not because I needed the money or missed the office politics, but because there was a part of me, the part that had spent 22 years trying to save companies and build value, that couldn't quite let go of the challenge. "I'll think about it," I said, ending the call. That night I couldn't sleep. What did I actually want from this situation? Money? An apology? Revenge? By morning I had my answer, and it was bigger than any of those things. I called Patricia back at 7 a.m. "I'll meet with your board," I said, "but not tomorrow. Today, this afternoon. And I'm coming with conditions." "What kind of conditions?" "The kind that ensure this never happens to anyone else again." There was a long pause. "Okay, 2 p.m.? I'll be there." As I hung up, I realized I was smiling. For the first time in weeks, I had a plan. 4 hours later, I walked into the Hammond Industries boardroom wearing the exact same outfit I'd been fired in: khakis, dress shirt, blazer, and deliberately no tie. The message wasn't subtle, but then subtlety hadn't worked for me before. The board members rose when I entered, which was interesting. 2 weeks ago, they'd sat silently while Justin humiliated me. Now they were standing like I was some visiting dignitary. Their expressions ranged from desperate hope to embarrassed discomfort. Patricia looked like she hadn't slept in days. Justin was notably absent. "Thank you for coming, Ryan," the chairman said. He was a guy named Robert Walsh who'd been on the board for about 8 years but had never said more than hello to me before this crisis. "We really appreciate your willingness to discuss the situation. Let's skip the pleasantries, I replied, taking a seat at the table where I'd presented quarterly reports dozens of times. In the 2 weeks since I left, your stock has fallen 62%. 3 major clients have announced they're reviewing their contracts with Hammond. The business press is running daily speculation about when you'll file for bankruptcy. Uncomfortable shifting around the table. A few board members exchanged glances. You've lost the Pinnacle merger, which was your last realistic chance at survival without major restructuring. Even if I could somehow convince Scott to reconsider, and that's a significant if, the terms would be substantially worse now. Pinnacle holds all the leverage. We understand the gravity of the situation, Patricia said. She looked older than I remembered, like the stress was aging her in real time, but we have to try something. Do you? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already made your choice. You chose Justin's authority over business relationships. You chose dress code compliance over a $2.8 billion deal. You chose silence over defending the person who'd spent 3 years saving your company. The room went quiet. I could hear the air conditioning humming. Why should I help any of you? I continued, looking around the table and meeting each person's eyes. Every single one of you was in that conference room 2 weeks ago. Not one of you spoke up for me or questioned what was happening. You sat there and watched your colleague get destroyed by a 28-year-old kid, and you did nothing. More uncomfortable shifting. The chairman cleared his throat. We made a terrible mistake, he admitted. A catastrophic error in judgment. What would it take for you to consider returning? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder my attorney had helped me prepare the night before. These terms are non-negotiable. I placed it in front of him, watching his eyebrows rise as he read the first page. He passed it to Patricia, whose face went pale. Then to the other board members. I could see their expressions change as they absorbed what I was asking for. This is extensive, Patricia said finally. Yes. Full reinstatement as chief operating officer at triple my previous salary. A permanent seat on this board. Complete autonomy over strategic decisions. A substantial equity stake in Hammond Industries. I paused. And a public statement acknowledging the error in my termination. Triple salary seems excessive, one board member objected. Does it? How much is Hammond Industries worth today compared to 2 weeks ago? How much would successful completion of the Pinnacle merger have been worth? I let that sink in. I'm essentially asking for a small percentage of the value that was destroyed when you let Justin fire me. Robert read further into the document. This clause about new ventures. You want majority ownership of any new business initiatives you develop while employed here? 60% ownership for me, 40% for Hammond Industries. Any resources I use will be properly compensated, all arrangements documented meticulously. That's highly unusual, another board member said. So is firing your chief operations officer over a tie on the day of your biggest deal in company history, I replied. Consider it insurance against future misunderstandings about whose judgment matters more, mine or whoever happens to be the CEO's relative. They looked at each other. I could see the silent conversation happening. Glances, slight nods, barely perceptible head shakes. They were calculating. How much was Hammond Industries worth without me versus how expensive I'd become with me? Finally, Robert spoke. If we agree to these terms, you'll attempt to bring Pinnacle back to the negotiation table? I'll try. I can't promise success. The relationship damage is significant, and Scott Williams is a smart businessman. He knows you revealed something important about Hammond's decision-making process when you let Justin fire me. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Another round of silent board member communication. Robert pushed the contract back to me. It now bore his signature. Done. One by one, the other board members signed. Patricia was last, her pen hovering over the signature line for a long moment before she added her name. When can you start? Robert asked. I already have, I said, standing up. I'll be in my old office making calls. I suggest you all prepare for a very difficult few months. Rebuilding what was destroyed won't be easy or quick. As I headed for the door, Patricia called after me. What about Justin? I paused. What about him? He's still employed here in the research department. Will that be a problem for you? I smiled. Not for me, no. He'll have to live with the consequences of his choices. I'm more interested in building something new. That night, I called Scott Williams. As I'd expected, he wasn't particularly interested in revisiting the Hammond deal. "Your company showed its true colors, Ryan," he said. "The decision-making process, the priorities, the way they treat their own people. Why would Pinnacle want to tie our future to that?" "You wouldn't be," I said. "You'd be trusting me, and I now have the authority to guarantee what I promise." After 2 hours of conversation, Scott agreed to consider a revised proposal. The terms would be much less favorable to Hammond. Pinnacle would pay probably 30% less and demand significantly more control. But it was something, a foundation to build on. Over the next month, I worked to stabilize what could be saved while also pursuing an idea that had been forming since that first day back. The unusual ownership clause in my contract hadn't been random. I had a plan that went far beyond saving Hammond Industries. It started with a conversation with Brian Martinez, our head of product development. "I need a small team for a side project," I told him over lunch. "Something experimental. Can you spare a few people for evening and weekend work?" Brian looked intrigued. "What kind of project?" "Professional menswear, specifically business clothing that adapts to different workplace cultures." He seemed surprised. "That's not our industry." "No," I agreed. "But it's a market with problems that need solving, and my new contract gives me the freedom to explore new verticals." Within a week, Brian had assembled 4 of his best people. They were excited about the creative challenge, designing clothing that could transition between formal and casual, traditional and modern, all while maintaining the highest professional standards. We called it Executive Edge, and it was going to change everything. 6 months later, Executive Edge was ready for launch. What had started as evening brainstorming sessions had become a sophisticated operation. We'd partnered with a manufacturing facility in North Carolina, developed proprietary fabric blends, and created designs that solved real problems professional men faced every day. I began wearing our prototypes to work. Suits that could transition from boardroom formal to business casual with simple adjustments. Shirts with convertible collars. Jackets with subtle, removable elements. No one commented directly, but I noticed people watching, asking questions about where I shopped. The day before our official launch, I called a company-wide meeting. Everyone attended. They knew something big was coming. As I walked to the front of the conference room, I spotted Justin sitting in the back row, trying to blend into the wall. 6 months in a junior research role had significantly diminished his presence. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Today marks an important milestone for Hammond Industries. We've weathered our crisis, stabilized our core business, and now I'm ready to announce something new." Patricia sat in the front row, looking confused. This wasn't on her agenda. For the past 6 months, a small team has been working on a special project, one that represents not just innovation, but transformation. I clicked to display our first slide, the Executive Edge logo. I'm proud to introduce Executive Edge, professional menswear designed to adapt to changing workplace environments and standards. Murmurs swept through the room as I showed images of our designs. These aren't just clothes. They're solutions. Every piece addresses specific challenges professional men face daily. I gestured to my own suit. "Take what I'm wearing, standard business suit at first glance. But watch." I demonstrated the adaptability, collar adjustments, removable elements, style transitions. The room watched in fascination. No more buying multiple wardrobes for different workplace cultures. No more anxiety about arbitrary rule changes. I advanced to financial projections that made several executives sit straighter. Market research indicates significant demand. We've secured manufacturing partnerships, distribution channels, and a marketing strategy built on authentic storytelling. I paused, meeting Justin's eyes across the room. Every Executive Edge piece includes a tag explaining its inspiration. The story of how a single arbitrary judgment, a missing tie, nearly destroyed a company and derailed a $2.8 billion merger. Complete silence. Everyone knew exactly what I was referencing. That incident revealed something crucial. When professional capability becomes secondary to superficial compliance, everyone loses. Executive Edge offers a practical solution. I clicked to our launch announcement. Tomorrow. Thanks to my employment contract granting majority ownership of new ventures, Executive Edge operates independently with Hammond retaining 40% ownership. All development costs have been properly compensated and documented. Patricia stood up. "Ryan, this is news to the board. Shouldn't we discuss timing? My contract provides autonomy over this venture," I replied smoothly. The timing isn't negotiable, but your support is welcome. The launch exceeded every projection. Press coverage focused on both innovation and origin story. Fired over a tie, how one executive turned humiliation into innovation became a viral headline. Orders overwhelmed our initial inventory. Professional men across industries responded to the practical designs and the message behind them. We weren't just selling clothes, we were selling dignity, adaptability, and professional confidence. 2 weeks after launch, Scott Williams gave an interview mentioning Executive Edge. "I wear their suits now," he told a reporter. "Best business wear I've owned, and I appreciate supporting a company that values substance over appearance." The interview went viral. Orders tripled overnight. 3 months later, Executive Edge had become a phenomenon. We expanded into accessories and workplace essentials, each piece maintaining our core philosophy of professional adaptability. Our financial results spoke for themselves. Executive Edge generated more first-quarter revenue than Hammond Industries' core business. The 40% ownership stake had become the company's most valuable asset. Meanwhile, the restructured Pinnacle deal finally closed. Less favorable terms than the original, but enough to ensure Hammond's survival. Scott made his continued support conditional on my leadership, a point he emphasized publicly. On the anniversary of my firing, I called one final company meeting. The atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. 1 year ago, I was fired for not wearing a tie, I began, wearing our latest design. Today, I want to talk about growth, not just revenue, but understanding. I displayed Executive Edge's remarkable trajectory. What began as response to arbitrary judgment became something larger, a movement celebrating substance over superficiality. I announced Executive Edge's transition to full independence, with Hammond retaining its profitable ownership stake. Then I revealed my final surprise, a foundation funded by our profits, providing grants and mentorship to professionals facing workplace discrimination. The fellowship program includes opportunities for those who've made significant professional mistakes and demonstrated genuine growth, I said, looking directly at Justin. After the meeting, Justin approached me, the first time since that day a year ago. "The fellowship program," he said quietly. "Is it real?" "Everything I do is real," I replied. "Would I be eligible?" I studied him. The entitlement was gone, replaced by something like humility. "The application process is rigorous. Comprehensive self-assessment, growth plan, no special treatment." He nodded. "I understand. I just need to become someone different." 2 months later, Justin applied and received an alternate fellowship position. His message afterward was simple. "Thank you for the opportunity to be more than my worst moment." Executive Edge grew beyond my wildest projections. What started as response to humiliation evolved into an enterprise empowering thousands of men to navigate workplace challenges without compromising their dignity. The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't Justin's diminishment or Hammond's struggle. It was transforming a moment meant to shame me into a movement that elevated others. Sometimes the most powerful response to someone trying to make you smaller is growing so large they can't help but stand in your shadow. That shadow can either darken or enlighten. The choice is yours. Thanks for staying with my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear what struck you most. Was it the firing, the comeback, or building something meaningful from pain? Your thoughts matter to me. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and subscribe for more. There are always more stories to share, and I'd be honored to have you along for the journey.